Before before we could start the session today, let me just give you a brief introduction about me so that you would at least get to know what I do. So, how would our course go? What will be the curriculum that we will be learning from this course? And one thing that you all know is cloud security is one of the very emerging fields within security. So cloud is not going to go away, and cloud keeps on getting improved with the different components, with the different architectural designs, and we could do a lot many things within the cloud these days, right? So you do not even need on-premise servers, you do not need any on-premise network management, but you could literally able to do everything from the cloud itself. So before you could see a decade back, 10 years back, so, computing was getting a little popular. So when it was launched, there were only few services. So now within AWS, within Azure, even with Google Cloud, so we've got a lot of components where literally you could able to handle everything from the cloud itself. So as cloud is developing and now within the cloud, so we wanted to provide security for the cloud. So how do we do all of that, right? So this is where cloud security is there. And now as they host a lot of things within the cloud itself, and it's also very important for the cloud to protect it. So that is where we are. So we will be learning cloud security so that we can, in case if you're already working with cloud security, that's good. So you could able to upskill yourself here. So looking into what are all the policies, procedures, the configurations that we have to make within the each of these components of AWS and Azure. So in case if you are looking to get into cloud security, I think this will be a very great platform for you so that you could upskill yourself, learn about what is cloud and how to protect the cloud and what are the different components. Not just that. So we also have a lab setup for you. So both in AWS and Azure. So we have a lab setup for you. So we've installed the virtual machines. So we can create the policies, we can create a web application firewall, create a stateless firewall, configure its rules. We can use AWS Lambda, we can use AWS config. So we can use Azure Sentinel, Azure Functions, Azure Playbooks. So there's a lot many things, a lot of components that I've just said, right? So now we could literally perform all of that within our curated virtual machine. So where you guys will also be having access to it so that we can have a practice on hands experience. Okay, now before we could start, let me share my screen and let's understand, as this is just the introduction session, so let's try to understand what is cloud first, right? So now why do we need cloud? Why can't I just, buy a server and configure everything on a server, right? So I can configure memory to a server. I can configure, okay, the RAM to a server. I can, process my own applications to a server. So why could I do that? Why couldn't I do that? So it was, previously, if you see 10 years back, they used to have a rack of servers across their data centers. So now let's take the whiteboard. I guess we can take the whiteboard from here. I don't know. Let's see. Okay, so I'm gonna use. So this particular course would be completely practical. So I really do not like to show all of these things over the slides. So I don't like PPTs. I want all of us to ensure that we can. One second. Maybe I can take in another. One second, guys. Let us access. So I think that was okay. Let me take another profile of it. So meanwhile, within the next few days, so it's not just that we have our own lab. So you guys would also be creating your own accounts in AWS Azure. So you have the free trial versions, right? So from Azure, you could use for 30 days. From AWS portal, you could also use it for 30 days. So, but I know if you ingest something to it, it might cost you. That's the reason. So we have our own virtual lab wherever, whenever we want to practice something, so we could practice it on live on that specific virtual cloud environments that we've created. But anyway, we can get to talk about it later. First, let's try to understand what we're looking over. One second, little whiteboard. Okay, maybe I'll say web whiteboard. So web whiteboard have been acquired by Miro and Miro have been acquired by Google. And this is one of the cute digital whiteboards, guys. Okay, let's start with this. Okay, so why do we actually need cloud, guys? So if we just talk about what is cloud computing and why does the organizations use it, and how does cloud computing works? Now, okay, if it works, what is it doing behind the scenes? And we can also talk about a little practical example on how the cloud works. Okay, so we are learning cloud security, right? So we are learning. Sorry, I might just take this a little low. Right, so we are learning cloud security. Maybe not this. One second. One sec. One sec. Okay, so we're learning cloud security. Okay, we'll talk about security for sure, but in order to understand cloud security within cybersecurity, cloud security is also one of the domain. So where and the name itself says that we will be working on protecting the cloud infrastructure. Okay, what is cloud infrastructure? So what is cloud computing first of all, right? So today let's look into some of the key aspects of what is cloud security and what are why do the organizations need them, right? You have to understand, why the organizations need cloud security or cloud computing, and how do they use this cloud computing to work within their organization. And we'll talk about some practical examples. So we may not talk completely about it, but just at least let's have some idea about so what is cloud computing, guys? Okay, first, if you see what is cloud computing, anyone, anyone could tell me what is this? Why do we use and how the organization wanted to implement it? So let's say that I'll say what is cloud computing. So do you guys have any quick points to talk about it? Okay, so let's take 10 years back. Okay, so now what I wanted to do is, let's say this is your machine and you wanted to communicate to some website. Let's say this website is amazon.com. Now how we this used to be a physical server. So now just like I have your my machine, yeah, just like you have your phone, this is also a physical machine across they might have installed on a data center, and this is a physical server. And servers will contain a lot of RAM, contains a lot of memory, and it can handle a lot of operations. So this is a physical web server. That means, what web server would do? Web server would communicate using HTTPS. Right, the request goes and the response comes, and it is coming from a physical server. And to handle this physical server, you need to have a lot of network resources. So now you need to configure this to your network, and then you need to ensure that this physical server doesn't get off. Right? There's a lot of challenges maintaining this physical part of servers, right? And now install, if I wanted to have this as a web server, I need to install APIs, I need to develop some code, I need to test the code, implement the code, and then implement it to my web server's API, and then I've got to get to have the request provided with the response from this web server. Trust me, there's a lot of hectic work that we have to do with the physical servers. So here, that is what we are doing. So we are not managing it physically enough, so we are managing it on the cloud. It's not just a web application, it can be anything. It can be the data. So the cloud, what the cloud can do is it can store your data. This is what we personally use cloud for, right? So for a particular storage, for managing this SQL servers, where we can manage the database, which can be a structured database or which can be an unstructured database, right? So within structured database, so we might probably get to use, so where is this gone? SQL servers. Here we might use no SQL servers. So you have DynamoDB, right, which is an unstructured, so NoSQL server within AWS platform. So we can handle different servers virtually. So now you don't have to have the physical servers. You have some platform. Okay, let's say this is the cloud platform. Now I could able to ingest. Okay, even the networking, subnetting. So even the management of software, so management of the applications, managing different technologies. Now I could do all of this, so I could just do all of this from a single platform, and that platform is the cloud. So I don't have to manage this, but this cloud will be managing it. And which companies are providing these services, and these cloud services are being provided majorly by AWS, so which is Amazon Web Services, Azure from so Microsoft, and Google Cloud
நம்ம சேவை கரெக்டான்னு
Platform
பாத்துக்கோ.
from
ஓகேவா?
Google,
சூப்பரா.
right?
சூப்பர் சூப்பர் கமலா. கமலா சூப்பர் கமலா.
Right, so
மதுரை
these
நீங்க
are the top performing cloud computing services, right? So guys, please mute yourself. So now why we would need cloud computing is so that we can provide internet services not just physically, because there'll be a lot of challenges physically. So now I wanted to deploy all of them virtually, right? So I wanted to deploy internet services so effectively over a virtual kind of environment, and that virtual kind of environment is cloud. And it offers us to do all of this. It offers us to store, it offers us to create database. It can be any databases, it can be any servers that we want to do, or networking. So managing the software, managing the applications, or even developing the application, testing the application, so creating a repositories for them, and and the technologies that is being implemented across these servers, you could manage all of them on the cloud itself. One good thing here about is, so you will only be paying for whatever that you've used. Okay, let's say if you're having some server, let's say you bought 10 servers, physical servers, and now you are just only using 8 servers, and you kept 2 servers as backup, which is not serving any purpose, but you are managing them. And to manage a physical server, it costs you something, right? So now it is waste of whatever, it is just waste that you have it separately and you're not using it, but you're still paying for that, right? So here, so this is so scalable that, so whatever that you use, only you pay for that, pay as you use, right? So that is also one of the very good platform, right? So I don't have to pay unnecessary money. And now, so these are on demand payment, so whatever you use, so you could just on demand pay. So you just have to pay for whatever that you use. And they are so scalable. That means you can just so make sure everything is reconnected by itself within the same platform. Okay, let's say if there's a database server separately, the software is running on it separately, the applications developing on it separately on different servers, and now we have to combine all of them. So we have to form a network so that one can interact with the other one. So each of this have to be interacted. So then we have to form a network there. Here the cloud itself is forming a network, so you don't have to do anything, right? So it is one of the scalable platforms where you could literally connect everything at once, so that so you would able to understand what you are using and how can you ensure that you have a better architecture to ensure that you have your organizational infrastructure working in a very good platform. And now it is so accessible, guys. So now the data and the applications are available anywhere, anytime. You don't. So okay, let's say now if I have to access this server, okay, I have to go to this Bangalore data center, Mumbai data center. So physically, I have to go do some changes or configuration and then come back. Here, you don't have to. You don't have to go there. So right now, let's say I'm in Bangalore, I can control it. Or let's say you're in your hometown, you can access the cloud. You can so accessible, so you can access this cloud from anywhere, everywhere, right? So now this becomes easier for you if you can access it from everywhere, right? So now this is what is cloud computing. So now this lets us to manage our infrastructure so easily. And trust me, 70 to 80% of most of the bigger organizations have all of their assets. These are all the assets, right? Have all of their assets deployed into the cloud. And that's the reason. So the cloud is one of the very emerging domains within software. And as we are managing everything in the cloud, so now we also have to ensure that we have to protect the cloud, right? So that is where we've got this cloud computing. So now, as I also told you, what are some of the reasons why the organizations would be using them, right? So let's also see why. So now you know what it is, right? All of this is what. So let's talk about why do the organizations need cloud. So on-demand scans. That means I can save the money, right? I can, this is what one of the major factor, guys. So I need to have good access, but I wanted to save money and I wanted to provide the best services. So now the one thing that could able to do all of this for me is the cloud. And one of the wide reasons on why I need cybersecurity, if I can write some quick points here, maybe I'll write about it. The quick points on why I need cybersecurity is because so it is the cost management. So I can say cost savings. So I will only pay for what I use, right? So now I'll have a lot of flexibility and scalability. So I'll have a lot of flexibility and say scalability. So it is so flexible, right? I can manage everything at once, and I could also scalable, or I could able to scale it. Instead, I could make the operations to work so easily for me, right? So flexibility and scalability is one of the reasons. And now this cloud platforms would use the advanced technologies, guys. No, we have to know. Okay, let's say if I wanted to deploy a storage, now I should so need a people who works on data science, or he must be a data scientist. He must have access to a lot of things, Kafka, Hadoop, there's lot many things. Why can't I don't want all of that. I just wanted to look into you have the cloud provides storage. Okay, let me push the all of my things into the storage. So it can be a structured data or unstructured data. So here it can provide the advanced technologies. Right now it uses machine learning and artificial intelligence, right? So now we would also be having so disaster recovery and business disaster recovery And so business continuity, one of the important factors within cloud computing. For an example, let's say my organization got breached. So now all of my data is gone. So now I have to start my services again. I cannot say my client, okay, so my infrastructure is compromised with a cyber attack. All of our attack data is gone. So we will start our services in 2 months. 2 months, please wait. So they'll go away, right? So now disaster recovery, DR, BC, they continue. They'll have a lot of policies and procedures. So now, in order to back up or have a proper blueprint of architecture on how we are deploying all of our assets to manage our businesses, so to ensure the business being continuous and to ensure that if there's any disaster happens, we could be recovering from that disaster. So now cloud offers this solution just like that. So they come with auto data backup, which reduces the risk of the data loss, and it also helps organizations recover quickly from any disaster. It can be a cyber attack, it can be a tsunami. If there's a physical server, let's say if an earthquake comes, all the physical servers are gone, but the cloud, you don't have to do anything of that, right? So now, as I said, it is easily accessible, right? So it can be easily accessible. So I guess so these are the reasons why I think so the cloud security is very important. Okay. Now how does it work? So that is what we are going to look into, right? Okay, any questions meanwhile? So I'll just share this. So we just before we talk about securing the cloud, you have to understand what is cloud. So this is what is cloud. Any questions here? Okay, cool. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna give you the modules that we are going to learn within this cloud security platform. So now before we could start learning anything from the next sessions, so I think you have to know what you guys are learning and how is it going to be useful for your career or for your job. And trust me, so after this particular course, so you can be a cloud security engineer or a cloud security analyst. So not just working in one module, trust me, within cloud security, we've got different modules, right? So you have identity and access management, you have threat hunting and response, you've got security governance and management, so we've got infrastructure security, security logging and monitoring, data protection. So we've got different modules like this. Even if you could just learn one or two modules, you can get a job in cyber security, in cloud security. But so now I don't want you to just learn one or two modules, but I want you to learn all the modules that is related to security here. Right. So now let's talk about that. But before, let me give you access to your lab. So just hold on for a moment. So as I have deployed our virtual environment. So at least for AWS, we'll check for AWS. Okay. So now I'm just gonna give you the credentials to log in. So, but please ensure that if you can log in there. So this is our lab environment. So once you get enrolled, you will be having access to it. But anyway, I'm going to give you access to it for now. Okay, no, I always keep on rotating the usernames and passwords for this particular access. Okay, so now, so we are trying to sign into Amazon. So now, as you see across this, okay, now as as I share my screen. Okay, let me share my window. Okay, here, so you have over the chat box, so I've pasted, right? So the link where you can log in into AWS, you do not have to create account. So we have a virtual AWS cloud that has been deployed, and you can use that account ID. So now the username is the cloud user, and So there is an auto generated password which is so complex. You see? So now this is the password. Now I'm trying to log in. I hope you can. Okay, sorry. I need to get the complete password. Okay, let me enter the password. Okay, now you see I have logged in into my AWS. Right, so this is I haven't yet allocated the resources here, but as we keep on moving, so we will be working with the you see there's a lot of other okay, just the initial steps that it is trying to explain. So now we've got this access, right? So now what we are going to do is we are going to use this type of environments. So you guys will be having access to AWS. So now just like AWS, we will also be having a virtual platform created for Azure as well. So now if you just go to AWS home page, right? So this is where you are. And if you see all the services related to AWS, they do provide a lot of services, guys. If I wanted to learn cloud security, do I have to know containers, storage, the databases, if there's any migration from on-prem to cloud, so if there's any networking and content delivery network or developer tools, blockchain, okay, they have a lot many things. You see, they have a lot of services. So do you have to learn all of this? So tell me, how can someone learn all of this? So do you think you wanted to learn all of this? It is not practical, guys. Trust me, within even the DevOps people who works developing onto the cloud operations, they must be just knowing one or two of it. Maybe they might know EC2, or they might know EC2 image builders, or they might know AWS app runners, or maybe they might have some experience with any of these container or with the cloud or some database. That's all. And they must be working as a very big, you know, cloud computing engineer. Right? You don't have to learn all of this. Just like this, as AWS provide these services, just like this, and we also have so the cloud security of Microsoft, which is Microsoft Azure, would also be providing the same similar services, but the different names. These platforms are very same, guys. They're just the same. Let's say, no, they are just like two different cars. Let's say a car is from Skoda, a car is from, so let's say Volkswagen. So now they just provide the same thing, right? So they are cars, they make you travel, right? They let you drive, but the engines are different, right? And the way the services, the components that is there in engines, we might call it in different names on each of these parts. It is just like that. So the objective is just the same thing. The cloud objective is just the same thing, and now it offers it with the different services, and these are all some of the services. And you see within security, identity and compliance, and we've got most of it, and most of them are the very small services provided by the AWS cloud. So now before we could talk about any of these services that is there with security, or some of the important services that we probably get to hear when we start learning. So here, let's talk about what are all the modules that we are going to learn within this particular platform. So what are all the modules that we are going to learn? Let's look into it. So guys, meanwhile, would you have access? Do you have access to this? Could you log in? Please confirm. Can you log in? If you log in, we can also try to test the Azure login credentials as well. I want you to talk to me. Please, can you please confirm? I know I need to had an introduction session with you, but so I don't want it to bore you from the starting. So talking about the introduction and stuff, we can always know each other, guys. And even I wanted to know you, what you do. So what is your objective of this course? Why are you here? I wanted to know about all of that. Maybe we can talk about that later. But can you please confirm if you can have access to your AWS lab? Hello, Maya, Haima, Keshav, Afiz, Deepa. Can you talk? Sure, I think so. Yes, nice.
Yes, sir. I have got.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm, guys, because I was trying to create a virtual environment yesterday in the night so that we can use all of it. Okay, now what we will do is so let me share on my entire screen now. So let's try to understand what are all the modules that we are going to look into. So here, let me go to the whiteboard again. So where is the whiteboard? One second. Here we have the whiteboard. Right. So now I wanted you to understand what are all the different modules of security that we have within cloud security, and what are all the different services that is being used to work on these specific modules within cloud security. So let's look into all of that, guys, just to ensure that we have some idea. Okay, so let's look into what are all the modules that you have first, so that within each of these modules, so we have different services. Like I just showed you some of the names. Within AWS, within Azure, there are different services used for that specific module of protection within the cloud. So the first one, so trust me, guys, this course will be very much practical. So you will be it feels like you are working on your environment, or it feels like so you must be watching me doing a lot of lot of things as a person that working for major organizations. Meanwhile, we will also be having a quicker task like creating a firewall rules, creating a WAF, or create securing an EC2 instance, finding misconfigurations. We will be looking into a lot many things. It's not just about the learning, it's also about practice. So because if you have hands-on practice, so that so you gonna be more confident about your. So as you guys start looking for jobs, I could also try to help you create your resumes, so giving you some suggestions or some hints on how to crack the jobs. Meanwhile, as you get enrolled, so for every session, okay, let's say we are done with this. Okay, what are all the possible interview questions that you may be getting on this particular topic? So every day, so we will be looking over the key terms. Okay, what are we looking? Is there any task that we are performing? So accessing our virtual environment and performing that task, and meanwhile also learning the interview questions that I'm going to provide on day-to-day basis as we complete the specific topics. So now here, so what are the modules that we have? So as I just said in the beginning, so if you could just learn, either one or two modules, even, if you just learn IAM, you can work as a cloud security identity access management. So if you learn about data protection, so you could just learn. So if you could just say, okay, information cloud security engineer, you could become. So now there are a lot of cloud security modules. So cloud security modules. Let's look into these modules in brief, guys, but not in depth. So I don't want you to confuse a lot, talking about the different services and steps. But so let's name them first of all. So the first one that we've got, it's not the first one, so I'll just mix it up. So the first thing we have is identity and access management. Identity, sorry, and access management. So now, so in short, it is called as IAM. So across the organization, providing access to the employees or the users who has access to it. So now, it is one of the important roles in cloud security. So what level of an access that you have, what level of an identity that you are providing, So to an engineer working within your cloud, okay, let's say now we are handling a lot of different things here, right? So now let's say now there's a database engineer or a data scientist or who works on a database. Okay, he's just joined now. So now everything is there on the cloud. Let's say I'm using AWS cloud, which is very majorly used clouds, guys. So now I have to provide him access to this so that he can work on this storage or maybe configuring a database, anything, right? So now what level of an access that I should provide him? Should I provide him access to networking servers? No, right? So I will only provide him access to what he needs. So we call this as least user access privilege, least privilege. So now what is least privilege is, okay, whatever he needs, I will only give him access to what he does or what he needs for his job. I cannot provide, okay, so now you just joined, okay, you take all the access. We will not do that because least privileged access is very important. So whatever he needs access, we will only be doing that. And who is providing all of those access? And we saw there's a lot of services, right? And now we have to define what access for each of these services. We need to create groups. There's a lot many things within there. So identity access management deals with determining what level of an access that a user can have working with these services across the cloud. And one of the very good things that you can learn with cloud security is identity and access management. So the next thing is, so once you create access, so now there might be a lot of infrastructure, right? So we might have deployed a lot of things. You see, this is all our infrastructure deployed on the cloud. So how are we going to protect it? Infrastructure security. Okay, later, so whatever within the infrastructure, we will be having a lot of data as well, right? So we have to protect our data as well. Data protection. And meanwhile, so as we have data protection, so now in order to protect the data, so we have to have security logging and monitoring. Security logging. So I can say security logging and monitoring. Now, in order to ensure that everything is properly working, I have to log what is happening related to security and I completely monitor them so that I can find what is happening. So if there's any threat, so I could able to detect those threats across the cloud, threat detection and response. I can detect the threats and I could able to provide this. So now for threat detection and response, it has AWS and Azure both has automated way of detection and responding to it as well. AWS uses AWS Security Hub. So Azure uses Azure Sentinel, Azure Playbooks using Azure Functions. Now there's a lot of automations. Even in Azure you have Azure Sentinel, and that Sentinel has SOAR, security orchestration and automated response. Now there's a different aspects of automation here. Right now we are on the automated era, right? We are using machine learning, artificial intelligence. What are the services that is being used by both of this? And at last, one of the very important is security governance, guys. Governance. If you have some idea about auditing, let's say ISO 27001 or PCI, SOC 2 compliance, or maybe GDPR, HIPAA, NIST, there's a lot of security governance which we will definitely talk about. You should also have some knowledge about it. So we'll also be having security governance and management. So we have each of these modules, guys, and to manage each of these modules, AWS and Azure have its own services. For an example, if you take IAM, right? So if you take IAM and if you are just splitting into what are all the different components that you have in AWS and Azure. So just to define, just to make you understand a bit. So AWS has their own AWS IAM, and to integrate different platforms they use AWS organization, and to ensure that they could able to make a user login from a single place, they have single sign on, and they would also have an Amazon Cognito. So it manages user authentication for web and mobile applications that is be deployed on the cloud. Cognito, one of the recent ones and the advanced ones right now. And within Azure, so now Azure has Azure Active Directory. So we call this as AAD, right? So now within Azure Active Directory, they have conditional access. So here this is where, okay, AWS, you can say Azure AD conditional access. What this conditional access would do is it enforces the access policies to this active directories. So you have B2C, okay, Azure Active Directory business to client. You have Azure Active Directory identity protection. More importantly, just like they have IAM, so they have role based access controls. So just like this, within IAM, so both AWS has these services, Azure has these services. If you take infrastructure security for an example, so for infrastructure security here, so if I just refer down some of the names, we can always refer down for each of this. So we've got AWS, we've got Azure. So within AWS, we've got virtual private cloud, VPCs, right? So do network isolation, you can do subnetting, you can create access control lists, and you can create security groups using Amazon VPCs. And you have AWS Shield, so with this will provide DDoS protection. So you have AWS Web Application Firewall. So we have AWS Firewall Management, and you have AWS EC2 instance where you can deploy your virtual machines. Just like that, just AWS has VPC, so it has VNet. So it also has DDoS protection, Azure DDoS. So it also, sorry, it is sinking down. It also has Azure Firewall. It also has Azure Web Application Firewall. It also has NSG, so Network Security Groups. Network security groups. Just like that, each of this, maybe for the next session, we'll talk about in general about each of this. So just like as I spoke about for identity and access management, we've got this. For infrastructure, we've got this, and we will be learning whatever the services that would be useful for us. Okay, let's say AWS IAM. So what is IAM? So how do I access, as I provide an access to an employee, I can create an user. I can, create some policies for these users, and what access they should have. I could able to define them. So we'll have all of our hands-on practice within AWS IAM, guys. So just like that, we'll have a hands-on practice into all of the security services that is being provided on for AWS and Azure, right? So now as we have our lab environment, so we could always get to have access about it. So for an example, I'll just go to this. So now we haven't still done anything so far, but we are going to definitely do. You see security hub is there here. So this does automation of an incident response. You can run different playbooks here, run books here, workbooks here. So just a lot many things. So just like that, we will have platforms and we will learn about it. Okay. So now, as you might have some, at least some awareness on what is really happening on the cloud, right? So what cloud is actually doing. So now cloud is letting us access or letting us integrate our services over a virtualized platform so that it is very easier for us to maintain. So not only easier, no, we all have it in one place. So previously, before, it was a very mess, a complete mess. And how can you provide security for a complete mess, right? You don't know what is leaking somewhere. But if you have everything at once at one platform, So now why can't you just provide security to it, right? So it is also easier to become to manage your assets, and it is also becomes easier to manage security for this assets being deployed on the cloud, right? So now, so just to ensure that we protect everything on the cloud, so we have this cloud security modules. And remember, these cloud platforms uses a shared responsibility model. So now AWS and Azure uses a shared responsibility model. So now I can have a question. Okay, now as I'm integrating everything to the cloud, why can't AWS provide security to everything? Maybe I can pay them, right? So now, why can't they provide security? So as they provide cloud services, why can't they provide services to us, right? So now Azure. So now I integrate everything onto the cloud. So why can't they provide it? So now here, so let's say for an example, I'll just quickly go to AWS share responsibility model just to show you model document. So you have within cloud computing, you have infrastructure as a service. So you have SaaS, DaaS, PaaS, IaaS, right? Infrastructure platform as a service. So now let's see. Now it is a shared responsibility model. So even I could just say Azure uh, documentation related to shared services. So today tomorrow we'll talk about this so that we can have more understanding about it. So what is shared responsibility in the cloud? So now so what do they say, what do they protect security for? If you see this shared responsibility is there within the cloud, so what does they do? So now I have information and data. So within software as a service platform, so the customer has to protect their information. So anything with this, the Microsoft will protect. So here within this cloud platforms, so you can define security in two different ways. So security in a cloud. So now, okay, now you have everything in here, right? So where is our whiteboard? So you have everything in here. So now, so this will protect the cloud platform. So whatever the services that they are using, so that cloud platform will protect their services. But what are we doing? So we are using their services for our data, for our applications. So now AWS says, okay, I will protect my services, but I do not protect the data that you deploy on our services. It's your responsibility. It's your responsibility on how you provide access to your employees or how you provide identity to multiple services. That I don't know. You take care of that security because that is your own infrastructure. The services that you are using, okay, I provide security for that, right? So that is security in a cloud that is being provided by the cloud security provider. So whereas security of the cloud, now they are protecting the security in the cloud, but anything that we are deploying to the cloud, so it's our responsibility to protect that infrastructure that is being deployed to a cloud. It can be applications, it can be storage, it can be databases, it can be networking. So the development, quality testing, if you deploy many other multiple applications, now it's your responsibility to protect that you are deployed to your cloud. So now that is where we've got these modules, and each of these modules are designed in such a way that it can protect all of our assets that is deployed on the cloud. So tomorrow if we meet, so we'll talk about the shared responsibility model in both AWS and Azure. Meanwhile, so I already created an Azure environment as well. I can also give you an Azure environment access to you tomorrow. But do not worry. So we're not so hurry. So to get into the lab right now, first we will concentrate on learning a bit of basics, definitely from the next session. So we are going to at least do something on a lab with some of the services each of the security modules have. We'll start working on it. So for sure, but before that, so we need to ensure that we know what is happening behind. So now you know cloud, right? So now you might probably get to understand what are you doing on the cloud and how do you protect the cloud, right? So if you have some general awareness like this, so it becomes very easier for you to start working on the lab. So meanwhile, we'll also create our own accounts so that we can also have a little bit of interface knowledge about the tool. And meanwhile, all of our practical things, so we will be doing it across the lab, guys. So what are we going to do across the lab? There'll be a lot many things that you will be doing on the lab. So every day we will be having some tasks. So just like, okay, now you are working for cloud security. Now I ask you, okay, now we have a requirement to create a rule on a web application firewall, or to create a rule on a stateless firewall. So how do you create a rule? So now within infrastructure security, we have WAF, we have firewalls. So how do you create a rule? So that we will understand. Okay, now there's a new person join. So he need access to an EC2 instance. So now how do you create a user? How do you provide access to an EC2 instance? How do you provide access to a specific storage container? So that we'll see in the lab. Right. So each of these we will be having multiple action items to perform, multiple tasks to perform practically. So this course will be a completely hands-on experience. And trust me, after this course, if you are looking for some certifications, you could also probably complete them. Right. So that is all I have for today, and I hope you've liked this. So definitely you would also like it more further, and I can promise you that. So this is going to be a very complete hands-on experience course, guys. So I think I have got few more minutes of my time. So if you guys have any questions to talk, please be very free to talk to me, guys. Treat me like a friend. I'm not a very big professional, so I I've been working within cloud security from the last many years. So that's why I'm here, so that we could all learn it together. So you can treat me as a good friend, because friends teaches us better than the other professionals or other lectures or teachers, right? Because friends teaches you so liberally. So I think that is what I would be doing here. Everything will be practical and very clear to understand the topics. Any questions here? And if you're on the group, so you have my number there. You know my name, right? At least now. My name is Manoj Kumar. So you might get to see my number on so on our WhatsApp group. So if you're free to contact me, so you can get in touch with me, ping me, so that I can know your requirements. So guys, anything to talk? We'll have a quick introductions as well. So once we meet tomorrow.
Sir, I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Sir, how it is the cloud security team? How to handle like this? I may know that how many members in that team stand.
So, Keshav, it all depends on the infrastructure. Let's say now I only have a few servers and a little data on the cloud. So now I don't need a 10 members team, right? So maybe if I just have one or two, three people on a cloud security team, that would be enough. So the number of people working within any of these modules will completely depend on how big their infrastructure is. So let's say Google. So they have a very big cloud security team, because so 90% of their services, their production is running on the cloud. So they have to protect it. So they have a very large team. So just like that, how big the infrastructure is, so that directly impacts the number of people working to provide security for their cloud. Got it?
I have one doubt. So, after completing this course, what kind of Azure security certificate I can do?
So there you have AWS Azure's specialty, which is one of the very good certifications. I wouldn't prefer you to do it in Azure, but AWS has a lot of exposure towards your jobs. So I would prefer you to do AWS, but so if you also wanted to do Microsoft, so there's also Microsoft Security MS 200. So for each of these modules that I've said, so there are different certifications for each of that, and you could also try to complete them. But Deepa, I would prefer you to go with AWS Security Specialty than Azure because that
Okay.
has more scope than the Azure.
Okay. One more thing. So in Microsoft Azure, are you going to teach only the Microsoft Sentinel and Defender, or other than these two tools, you are going to teach any other two?
So
Mm.
within AWS, within Azure as well. So as I just spoke about some of the modules in there. So we are
Mm.
going to look into Azure WAF. We are going to look into role-based access controls, the identity management. So whatever the other services that we are learning with AWS, we are going to learn it in Azure as well. But
No,
remember,
Azure. I
but remember,
prefer Azure actually. So in Azure, are you going to teach KQL queries as well as Purview, then Infra ID, those kind of things? Are you going
yes,
to teach?
intra-ID would be covered. KQL is used on the Sentinel logging and monitoring, so we might get a bit. See, so these are each of these components. If I just talk about each of these components in both AWS and Azure, so we can probably learn this course for 6 months for sure, because this is that big. But we are going to cover all of that deeper. Intra-ID, it's all about VPC. We are going to cover that. KQL, as we learn Sentinel a bit, so we are also going to learn KQL. So this is used to develop or build custom logging so that you can tell your Azure what to get, what not to get. So we will be learning KQL and Purview as well, a bit of it.
How about the Purview, that kind of tool, sir?
Yes, we will be learning, having some idea about it as well.
Okay. So any possibility to start with Azure, then AWS?
So we will be
First,
we'll be doing simultaneously, not just on one thing. We will be doing on both of it simultaneously.
okay.
Yes,
Okay. Each module you are going to teach simultaneously, both two.
exactly. Right.
Okay. Okay. So,
No problem. Okay, any more questions?
so you are going to provide that IAM, how to we have to create the access control. Everything you are going to provide some tasks to us, right?
Exactly. Right.
Okay. Every day we have a practical session. Am I right, sir?
Exactly, Deepa. Every day you would be having. Meanwhile, before you practice, we will be learning the theory related to that as well.
Okay. Okay.
Sure. Okay, then. So I have to jump to another call. So I would also be working with information security. I also teach a part of security operations center, information security, SOAR tools, SIM tools, CDR tools, email security, DLP. So my majors are all into cloud, but meanwhile, so all of my experience goes to that information security as well. So I have another call to jump over. So that is all I have for today. But so I'm looking forward to meet you guys tomorrow in the morning at the same time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you so much. We'll have this recording stopped, and you will have this recording. So you can send over your email ID over the group, and Lokesh is going to send you the recordings to your mail, and you can see it whenever you want, guys. It's not just now. After 2 months you wanted to just have a quick recap about this course, so you can quickly jump over and access these recordings. Right, so cool. So I'm really glad to meet you, but I couldn't able to know you, but will definitely know you as well. Thank you so
Sorry, sir.
much.
Last question. Sorry, sir. Last question. Could you provide a suggestion?
Sorry.